possibilities and the relentless pull of obsession. The ghost stories, their intertwined sorrows and hopes, lingered in the air like a whispered promise, but the path to redemption remained shrouded in darkness. The night deepened, and the theater held its breath, a silent witness to a man caught between the consuming fire of his past and the faint, flickering whisper of redemption yet to come. But even as the fragile hope glimmered, Elias knew the hardest act was still ahead, whether he could embrace release or be consumed forever by the stage that burned within him. And so the echoes continued, the silent theater holding its secrets, waiting for the next act to unfold beneath its haunted roof. The script was not yet finished. The air within the ruined theater thickened like a storm gathering strength. Elias Monroe stood at center stage, the worn wood beneath his trembling feet creaking in protest as unseen forces stirred the shadows. Around him, the spectral cast ghosts summoned through his obsession, and pain swirled in a tempest of fractured scenes and anguished cries. The theater, a crumbling husk of its former glory, seemed to pulse and groan as if alive, straining beneath the weight of memories it held captive. A sudden crash echoed through the hollow space. Scenery long decayed and half collapsed, shuddered and fell in pieces. The ghostly actors, caught in the maelstrom of Elias' unraveling mind, erupted into chaotic movement, their voices overlapping in a discordant chorus of grief and rage. Adan, the lead ghost, his pale form flickering like a candle's flame, stood tall amid the chaos, eyes blazing with sorrow and accusation. Elias, Adan's voice cut through the tumult, haunting and raw. Look at what you've done. The fire that stole us, the play that consumed us, still you rewrite, still you deny release. Elias' breath came in ragged gasps, his hands shaking as he clutched the tattered script. I need to fix it, he whispered, voice breaking. I need to make it right this time. But the ghosts would not be tamed. Lena, her shimmering figure gliding silently across the stage, wept spectral tears that shimmered like dew. Harold, a shadowy outline behind the curtains, gestured frantically, adjusting invisible ropes and pulleys, his presence a reminder of the theater's living history. The past and present collided violently, a tempest of memory and pain. Offstage, voices rose in a sharp, discordant duet. Clara's soft but urgent tone pleaded, Elias, this obsession is killing you. Let them go. Let yourself go. Marcus' voice countered, bitter and unyielding, the theater is a ruin, Elias. Your dreams burned with it. It's time to face the truth, move on, or be consumed. The clash of compassion and condemnation echoed through the hollow walls, tugging at Elias' fraying sanity. He staggered, caught between the spectral past and the harsh reality pressing in. A sudden tremor rippled through the foundation, dust falling like ash from the cracked ceiling. The theater groaned, a living beast bearing the scars of tragedy and art entwined. Elias sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of guilt and longing. Please, he begged, eyes searching Aidan's ghostly gaze, tell me how to end this, how to save you, and myself. Aidan's form softened, sorrow replacing accusation. Acceptance, he murmured, not control. Release, not repetition. The air stilled, the chaos ebbing, leaving a fragile silence pregnant with possibility. Elias' heart pounded as the theater held its breath, waiting for the choice that would decide their fate. And in that moment, the clashing worlds of art and pain, memory and reality poised on the edge of transformation or destruction. The night stretched on, the final act yet unwritten, the stage still burning forever in shadows and light. The theater was still but never quiet. The shadows clung to the broken seats and shredded curtains like old regrets, and in the center of the ruined stage, Elias Monroe stood, clutching a sheaf of scrawled pages as if they were the last tether to a world slipping fast from his grasp. His eyes, sunken and wild, darted toward the flickering shape emerging from the deep gloom. A pale figure, spectral and impossibly thin, stepped forward from the darkness. It was Aidan, the lead ghost, the man whose life Elias had unwittingly trapped in an endless loop of torment. Aidan's eyes, bright and haunted, fixed on Elias with a weight that seemed to press down on the very air. Do you see what you have done? His voice was a whisper and a lament all at once, carrying the ache of 1,000 lost moments. Do you understand the fire you set inside this place? inside us. Elias blinked, a cold sweat breaking across his forehead. He tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat, choked by years of denial. I wanted to fix it, he stammered, voice barely more than a breath. Fix. Aidan's gaze sharpened, cutting through the layers of self-delusion like a knife. You rewrote us into suffering. You chained us to your guilt, your obsession. We are trapped because you cannot let go. The heavy silence that followed was broken only by the distant groan of the crumbling theater, as if the building itself mourned alongside its spectral inhabitants. Elias sank to his knees, clutching the script like a talisman, the pages trembling in his grasp. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words empty but aching with truth. Sorry is a word, Aidan said softly, stepping closer, but it cannot undo the past, it cannot free us, only release can. From the shadows at the edge of the stage, Clara watched with a tightening in her chest. Her presence was a fragile thread to the living world, a silent plea for Elias to remember who he was beyond the haunted playwright imprisoned by his own making. Yet Elias seemed lost, swallowed by the ghosts of a tragedy he could neither escape nor amend. You held us in your hands, Aidan continued, voice breaking with sorrow, and yet you saw us only as echoes, ghosts to be rewritten, not as the souls who lived and died here. Your obsession has become a cage, Elias, but cages can be opened, if only you find the key. Elias's breath hitched. The script slipped from his fingers, fluttering like wounded wings onto the stage floor. The theater shuddered, the walls resonating with the weight of unspoken grief. His mind, frayed and fractured, teetered on the edge of collapse. He saw then, with a clarity that pierced his soul, the ruin his fixation had wrought, the lost lives, the pain unspoken, the cycles of repetition that had become his prison as well. How, Elias whispered, voice raw and trembling, how do I set you free, how do I release myself? Aidan's form began to fade, the edges of his spectral self dissolving like mist in the dawn. By letting go, he said, a final benediction laced with hope and sorrow. By accepting the past and choosing to no longer rewrite it. It is the hardest step, but the only one that leads to peace. As the last words echoed through the hollow theater, Elias was left alone with the empty silence and the fluttering pages at his feet. The ghost's presence lingered like a fading breath, and for the first time in years, the relentless cycle seemed to waver. Clara stepped forward, her voice a gentle anchor. You don't have to do this alone. Elias looked up, tears streaking down his pale cheeks, and for the first time, he saw not just the ruins around him, but the fragile path toward a reckoning long overdue. The stage that burned forever flickered once more, not with fire, but with the faintest glimmer of hope. He rose slowly, the weight of guilt and sorrow still heavy but no longer crushing. The reckoning had come. The question now was what he would do with it. And in the echoing silence of the ruined theater, the first fragile notes of redemption began to stir. The shattered glass lay scattered across the cold wooden floor like fallen stars, each fragment catching the flickering candlelight and fracturing the darkness into 1,000 splinters. Elias Monroe crouched before the broken mirror, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the jagged edges. The air in the ruined theater was thick with silence, yet it hummed with a spectral energy, a restless pulse that seemed to seep from the very walls, steeped in memory and sorrow. His breath came in shallow gasps, each exhale a mist that mingled with the dust motes swirling in the dim light. In the broken surface before him, Elias's reflection was no longer whole. His face fractured into shards, each piece twisting and distorting, shifting shape like the surface of a disturbed pond. But it was not just his own visage that danced within the fragments. Ghostly faces emerged, their features pale and wavering, Aidan's eyes shimmering with a haunting blend of sorrow and accusation, Lena's silent gaze heavy with unspoken grief, Harold's shadowed outline fading into the edges. They whispered, voices like a mournful breeze, swirling around him, weaving a tapestry of pain and regret. You broke us. Aidan's voice was a fragile echo, both a plea and a verdict. Elias's hands clenched into fists, nails biting into his palms, grounding himself against the flood of memories crashing through his mind. I tried to save you, he whispered, voice raw and hoarse. I tried to fix what I destroyed. The ghosts' faces blurred and merged, their expressions shifting from sorrow to fury, then to pleading. The theater around him seemed to breathe, the cracked boards creaking softly, the faded velvet curtains fluttering as if stirred by an unseen wind. Shadows lengthened and twisted, crawling along the walls like living things. A sudden weight settled on Elias's shoulders, a heaviness born of guilt and despair that threatened to crush the fragile remnants of his sanity. He staggered back, breath hitching, heart pounding in frantic desperation. The fractured mirror had become a portal, exposing not only the ghosts of those lost, but the shattered pieces of himself he had tried to deny. In the doorway, a soft rustle broke the oppressive stillness. Clara stepped cautiously into the room, her footsteps light against the worn floor. Her presence was a balm, a tether to the world Elias was slipping from. She knelt beside him, her hands gentle as they brushed away a stray lock of damp hair from his forehead. "Elias," she murmured, voice steady though edged with sorrow. "You don't have to carry this alone. Let me help you, please." Her eyes, soft pools of compassion, searched his haunted gaze. In them Elias glimpsed a fragile hope, a chance at salvation he was too terrified to grasp. "I'm broken," he confessed, voice barely audible. "I don't know how to be whole again." Clara's hand tightened reassuringly. "Then let me be part of your healing. We can face this together." But before Elias could respond, the heavy thud of footsteps echoed from the theater's entrance. Marcus appeared, his sharp features carved in the gloom, dark suit a stark contrast against the ruin. His gaze was cold, unyielding, a harsh reminder of the world Elias was desperate to escape. "This ends now, Elias," Marcus said, voice edged with finality. "You were losing yourself, dragging everyone down with you. The theater, the play, it's poison. You need to let go." Elias felt the weight of Marcus's words, brutal and unforgiving, pressing down like the walls of a collapsing tomb. Yet within the harshness, there was a strange clarity, a painful truth he could no longer deny. As the tension thickened, a chill swept through the room. From the shadows behind Elias, a pale figure emerged, Aiden, the lead ghost, shimmering with ethereal light. His gaze locked onto Elias, eyes filled with a sorrow deeper than the night itself. Silent, he reached out a translucent hand, a gesture both accusatory and pleading. Elias's breath caught. The theater seemed to pulse with an oppressive energy, the boundary between past and present dissolving into a suffocating haze. The ghosts, the memories, the shattered reflections all converged in a tumultuous storm within his mind. Torn between the love and hope Clara offered and the merciless reality Marcus embodied, Elias found himself at the edge of an abyss. The fractured mirror before him was no longer just glass, it was the shattered essence of his soul. "Who am I now?" he whispered, voice breaking. "Without them, without the play, what remains?" The ghosts faded slowly, the theater's breath settling into a heavy silence. Clara's hand remained warm in his, Marcus's stern eyes never leaving him. And in the quiet, Elias understood that the path forward would demand something he had long resisted, the courage to face the shattered pieces and forge a new self from the ruins. The night stretched on, the future uncertain, but a fragile ember of hope flickered in the darkness. As Elias rose unsteadily to his feet, the shattered mirror caught a final glint of candlelight, a fractured reflection, but a reflection nonetheless, waiting to be made whole. The stage was set, the final act had yet to begin. The air inside the ruined theater was thick with a palpable tension, as if the very walls held their breath in anticipation. Elias Monroe sat hunched at the battered wooden desk that had once served as the playwright's altar, now scarred by years of neglect and the ghosts of past performances. A single candle flickered weakly, casting long, wavering shadows that danced upon the cracked plaster and soot-stained beams overhead. His fingers trembled as they gripped the pen, moving feverishly across the yellowed pages, rewriting lines, erasing words, and scrawling new passages in a desperate bid to mend the fractures that had splintered his life and trapped so many souls in eternal torment. The room pulsed with an otherworldly energy, the very air vibrating with the whispers of the spectral cast summoned nightly by his obsession. The ghostly figures swirled around him, their translucent forms shimmering like mist caught in moonlight. Their voices rose in a haunting chorus, weaving through the silence with fragmented lines and mournful sighs, a dissonant symphony of pain and longing. Alias's eyes, hollow and haunted, flicked between the page and the apparitions, his heart pounding with a frenetic mixture of dread and hope. From the shadowed wings of the stage, Adon emerged, the lead ghost's pale face illuminated by the flickering candlelight. His ethereal eyes, deep wells of sorrow and accusation, locked onto Elias's with an intensity that stole the breath from the playwright's lungs. Adon's remnants of the stage costume hung loosely on his spectral frame, a ghostly echo of the man he had been before the fire claimed him. He stepped forward, the floorboards creaking faintly beneath his intangible feet, his presence commanding yet laden with grief. The theater seemed to breathe around them, the broken rafters creaking as if alive, the shadows deepening and retreating in a restless rhythm. Elias met Adon's gaze, the weight of unspoken words pressing down upon him. The playwright's voice cracked as he whispered, "I'm trying to fix it, to set you free." Adon's expression was a mixture of pleading and reproach, his voice a ghostly echo that trembled through the air. "You cannot rewrite the past, Elias. You can only live with its ashes." Before Elias could respond, a soft footfall interrupted the charged silence. Clara appeared at the threshold of the stage, her calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos around them. Her eyes, warm and steady, searched Elias's face with a mixture of compassion and quiet urgency. "You don't have to do this alone," she said gently, stepping closer. "Let go of the guilt. Let yourself breathe." Elias's hands faltered on the pen, and for a fleeting moment, the torment that had consumed him seemed to waver. The ghosts around them quieted, their forms dimming, as if sensing the fragile humanity rekindled in the playwright's heart. Yet the theater would not remain still for long. A low rumble surged through the broken walls, and spectral flames flickered along the scorched beams, casting eerie light upon the ruins. The ghosts rose in a crescendo of anguished performance, their voices rising in a tumultuous wave of sorrow and rage. Scenes from the play unfolded with vivid intensity: the fire, the screams, the shattered dreams, each echoing the devastating cost of Elias's creation. Elias's voice rose above the spectral tumult, his final words inscribed with feverish determination. "Let this be the end, the last act." As the echoes of his declaration faded, the theater seemed to shudder, caught between destruction and salvation. The ghosts' forms wavered, some reaching toward the light beyond the ruins, others fading into the shadows. Elias felt the weight of years lift slightly, a fragile hope blossoming amidst the ashes. But the price was not without peril. His body trembled, the strain of obsession and creation threatening to unravel him completely. Clara's hand found his, steadying and warm, a tether to the world he had almost lost. Marcus's distant voice pierced the chaos, a reminder of the harsh judgments waiting beyond these haunted walls. In this crucible of memory and pain, Elias Monroe stood at the edge of oblivion and redemption, his final rewrite a desperate plea to break the cycle. The stage that burned forever held its breath, awaiting the playwright's next move, one that would decide the fate of the ghosts, the theater, and himself. The candle guttered, casting one last flicker of light before darkness embraced the room. And in that silence, a fragile new beginning whispered its promise. The air hung heavy with a strange heat, unnatural and suffocating, as if the theater itself had caught fire anew. Elias Monroe stood at the center of the ruins, surrounded by the skeletal remains of broken seats and shattered stage props, the smell of smoke lingering though no flame burned. Yet in the flickering shadows cast by some unseen light, the theater seemed alive with spectral embers, glowing faintly like the dying coals of a fire that refused to extinguish. Around him, the ghostly figures of his lost cast stirred, their forms shimmering and wavering as if caught between worlds. The flicker of their presence was like a dance of ashes in a restless wind, fragile, mournful, relentless. Elias's breath came in ragged bursts, his thin frame trembling as the weight of the past pressed down on him like a stone. From the shadows emerged Adon, the lead ghost, his pale features etched with sorrow and rage. His haunting eyes met Elias's, burning with a light that was both accusation and plea. "Do you see now, Elias?" Aidan's voice was low, a tremor in the heavy silence. "The theater burns because you will not let it die, because you refuse to release us." Elias's fingers clenched into fists, nails biting into his palms. "I'm trying," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm trying to fix it. To make it right, fix it." Aidan's laugh was bitter, hollow. "The fire took us because of your obsession, not the play, not the art. It was your guilt, your denial, that fed the flames. And now you've trapped us here, night after night, reliving the pain you won't face." As Aidan spoke, the theater seemed to pulse, the walls shimmering with spectral fire that cast an eerie glow over the cracked wood and peeling paint. The ghosts of the cast swirled like smoke around Elias, their faces twisted in silent cries and mournful gazes. Lena drifted through the haze, her apparition barely more than a whisper of light. Her eyes locked with Elias's, and in their depths was a fragile hope, a silent forgiveness that he felt sear through his soul. She reached out, a hand trembling with longing, but her form flickered and faded before he could touch her. The creak of timber and the soft footfalls of Harold, the stagehand ghost, echoed through the theater. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, embodying the theater's long, tormented history. The air around him was thick with the weight of unspoken memories, the ghosts of countless performances past. Elias sank to his knees amid the ghostly flames, the heat searing but the fire intangible. "I'm sorry," he choked out, tears streaming down his gaunt cheeks. "I never meant for this. For any of it." The ghosts paused, their spectral forms still in the suspended moment. Aidan stepped closer, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "Then let it end. Let us go. Let yourself go." For a long moment, Elias remained still, the theater alive with the crackling of spectral fire and the heavy silence of waiting. Then slowly, with a trembling hand, he reached toward the tattered script, lying at his feet, the play that had consumed him, that had destroyed everything he loved. With a deep, shuddering breath, Elias tore the pages free, letting the fragments drift into the spectral flames. As the paper burned without smoke or ash, a profound stillness settled over the theater. The ghosts' faces softened, the torment in their eyes fading like mist. The fire died down to a faint glow, then to nothing. The theater fell silent, the oppressive heat replaced by a cool, gentle breeze that whispered through the broken rafters. Elias rose slowly, feeling the weight of years lift from his shoulders, though the scars of guilt and loss remained etched deep within him. He looked around at the empty seats and shattered stage, the place that had been both prison and sanctuary, and for the first time saw it as a place of endings and perhaps beginnings. As he stepped toward the exit, a faint echo of applause brushed against his ears, a ghostly reminder of what had been, and what might still be remembered. The stage that had burned forever was silent at last, but its story would linger in the hearts of those who dared to remember the fragile beauty born from pain. Outside, the cold night air embraced him, sharp and real. The theater behind him stood quiet, a monument to loss and redemption intertwined. Elias walked away, carrying the ashes of his past, but with a tentative hope flickering within a hope that even from ruin, something new might one day rise. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the stage that burned forever settled into silence, its flames extinguished but never forgotten. The air in the ruined theater was thick with a silence, so deep it seemed to press against the very bones of the structure. Elias Monroe stood alone on the center of the cracked stage, clutching the worn script that had long been both his torment and his salvation. The faded ink, smeared and fragile, was a mirror of his own unraveling mind. Around him, the spectral forms of the cast began to materialize, their outlines shimmering like smoke caught in the last light of dusk. They were thin, fragile, haunted ghosts not just of flesh and blood, but of memory and pain. Elias's breath came slow and measured, the weight of years pressing down upon him like the heavy curtain that had long since fallen on this place of tragedy. The faces around him, once vibrant with life and passion, now flickered with sorrow and longing. Aidan, the lead ghost, stepped forward, his pale eyes meeting Elias's with a depth of grief that crossed the boundaries of life and death. "It ends tonight," Adan said, his voice a haunting melody that filled the space, trembling with both accusation and forgiveness. Elias nodded, his voice barely more than a whisper. "It must. I cannot live this endless night anymore." The ghosts moved closer, their forms ebbing and flowing like waves of mist. Lena's delicate figure hovered near the edge of the stage, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. Harold, the stagehand ghost, lingered in the shadows, a silent witness to the final act of a tragedy that had spanned decades. Clara entered softly from the wings, her presence a tether to the fragile world of the living. She approached Elias, her hand resting gently on his shoulder, steadying him as the weight of his decision pressed down. "You are not alone," she said, her voice full of warmth and quiet strength. "Let go, Elias, it's time." The theater seemed to breathe around them, the dust motes catching the faint moonlight that filtered through the broken roof. The ghosts began to dissolve, their forms thinning and fading like the last embers of a fire dying to ash. With each breath, Elias felt the chains of obsession loosening, the relentless cycle of pain and repetition beginning to break. Adan's voice lingered a moment longer, a final benediction whispered in the stillness. "Remember us not as victims, but as part of the story you must finally set free." Elias closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a line down his worn face. When he opened them again, the theater was empty, bathed in a serene silence that spoke of endings and beginnings. The stage that had burned so fiercely with the fires of creation and destruction now lay quiet, a monument to the fragile beauty of art intertwined with suffering. He stepped forward, the weight of the past still heavy but no longer suffocating. The silence was not emptiness, it was peace. And for the first time in years, Elias felt the tentative stirrings of hope. Outside, the night sky stretched wide and infinite, stars flickering like distant promises. The stage that burned forever was silent at last, but its story etched in memory, pain, and redemption would echo in the shadows. A haunting refrain of the human heart's relentless quest for meaning. Elias took a deep breath and let the script fall from his hands. The cycle was broken, the ghosts were free, and so, perhaps, was he. The theater breathed a heavy silence, a quiet that felt both oppressive and cleansing. Elias Monroe stood at center stage, the boards beneath him creaking softly under his weight, as if the very bones of the place were whispering secrets too old to remember fully. The air was thick with the scent of dust, charred timber, and something faintly floral, perhaps a trace of the flowers Clara had once brought, or the memory of a long-forgotten bouquet left to wither in the wings. His eyes, bloodshot and rimmed with fatigue, scanned the shadows that clung to the theater's edges, where faint flickers of light danced like restless spirits. The ghosts of the cast had long since ceased their nightly torment, their forms no longer coalescing with the clarity and anger they once wielded. Instead, they lingered like soft echoes, wisps of memory caught in the corners of Elias's mind and the fractured theater alike. He could feel their presence as one might feel a chill in a room long after a fire has died down, a residual heat that refused to vanish. Among them, Adan's pale gaze was the most vivid, a haunting reminder of all that had been lost and all that could never be reclaimed. Elias's breath fogged in the chill of the empty space as he sank slowly to the floorboards, the weight of years pressing down on his chest. The relentless cycle was over, but the residue of pain remained, etched deep into his soul. He whispered the lines he had rewritten so many times, the words now hollow but still heavy with meaning. "We are the echoes," he murmured, "the shadows of what was and what might have been." A soft creak from the entrance made Elias look up. Clara stepped inside, her presence a warm contrast to the desolation around them. Her eyes were gentle but resolute, carrying the steadiness that had anchored him through his darkest nights. "You're here," she said simply. He nodded, managing a faint, wary smile. And yet, somehow not alone, she moved closer, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "The ghosts will always be a part of you, Elias, but they don't have to chain you. You can carry their memory without being imprisoned by it." Her words were a salve, stirring a fragile hope that had seemed impossible moments before. They sat together in the quiet, the theater's silence no longer a shackle but a space for healing. Yet the peace was fragile. The past was a specter that would not be fully exorcised. Their moment was interrupted by the sudden sound of footsteps echoing through the empty hall. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his sharp features etched with tension. His gaze flicked between Elias and Clara, a mixture of skepticism and reluctant respect in his eyes. "You're still here," Marcus said, voice low but carrying the weight of accusation and concern. "Do you really think this place can hold anything but ghosts and ruin?" Elias met his gaze, the fire of defiance flickering within his wary eyes. "It holds more than ruin. It holds memory. It holds truth." Marcus's lips tightened, but the edge of his bitterness softened. "Just don't let it consume you." With that, Marcus turned and left, his footsteps fading into the theater's shadows. Elias exhaled slowly, the encounter a stark reminder of the world beyond the crumbling walls and the delicate balance he now walked. As night deepened, Elias found himself alone once more, the weight of solitude pressing in. Yet in the stillness, he sensed a presence, not the accusing glare of Aiden, but something quieter, a final sigh from the past. The lead ghost's ethereal figure shimmered faintly beneath the cracked stage lights, eyes no longer filled with wrath but with a solemn farewell. Elias rose, his voice barely a whisper. "Goodbye, Aidan." The apparition nodded once, sorrowful and serene, before fading into the darkness. The theater remained silent, but the echoes of its tragic beauty lingered, woven into the very fabric of the night. Elias stepped back into the cool air beyond the doors, carrying with him the scars and the stories, the pain and the art forever intertwined. Ahead lay the uncertain path of healing and hope, shadowed yet illuminated by the fragile light of remembrance. Outside, the wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying the faintest hint of applause, as if the stage that burned forever still held a promise beyond the ashes. The air within the ruined theater was still, an oppressive quiet that pressed against Elias Monroe's chest as he lingered on the threshold of the stage that had been both his sanctuary and his prison. Dust motes danced in the pale moonlight filtering through fractured windows, and the timbers groaned softly, as if the building itself exhaled a long-held breath. Elias's gaze swept across the cracked floorboards, the charred remnants of set pieces, and the faded remnants of velvet curtains, ghostly traces of a world once vibrant with life, and now swallowed by ruin. For years he had been bound to this place, trapped in a relentless loop of rewriting, and rewriting the play that had consumed his life and the lives of those he loved. Each night, the spectral cast had returned, their sorrow and rage etched into the air like smoke. Tonight, however, felt different. The ghosts were silent. The theater seemed to hold its breath. Elias's fingers trembled as he clutched the dog-eared script, its pages worn thin from obsessive revisions. He lowered it slowly, the familiar weight no longer a tether, but a relic of a past he was finally ready to face. The silence wrapped around him, heavy yet strangely comforting, as if the theater mourned with him, acknowledging the end of its relentless torment. A soft sound stirred behind him, a cautious step against the dusty floor. Clara emerged from the shadows, her presence calm and steady. Her eyes, always so full of compassion and quiet strength, searched his face. "It's time," she said softly, her voice a balm to the turmoil within him. Elias met her gaze, the haunted depths of his eyes flickering with a fragile light. "I don't know if I can," he whispered, the weight of years pressing down, "but I have to try." Together, they moved toward the exit, the theater's darkness receding behind them. As Elias stepped beyond the threshold, a chill night breeze greeted him, carrying the distant hum of a city that had long since moved on. The stark contrast between the fading shadows of the theater and the faint glow of life beyond was almost unbearable, a reminder of all he had lost and all that might yet be. Outside, the world was vast and unknowable, but for the first time in countless nights, Elias felt a cautious stir of hope. The play's tragic legacy remained etched into the walls behind him, a testament to the consuming fire of creation and the cost it exacted. Yet, as he breathed in the cold air, He understood that while the stage had burned forever, so had a part of himself been forged anew in its ashes. Clara stayed close, her steady presence a tether to the world he had almost forgotten. "We'll take it one step at a time," she said gently, and Elias nodded, the faintest smile touching his lips. The theater stood silent in the night, a monument to art and pain, obsession and redemption, a place where memories lingered like smoke and the past was never truly gone. But tonight, its grip had loosened, and Elias Monroe had taken the first step toward a future unwritten. As they disappeared into the darkness, a single beam of moonlight caught the cracked stage floor, illuminating the faint outline of a flame silent, eternal, and unyielding. The stage that burned forever would live on in memory, but for Elias the fire had finally begun to die down. The night whispered its farewell as the city's distant lights twinkled like stars, and a new dawn waited just beyond the horizon. Elias's journey was far from over, but for the first time it was a journey toward peace.